Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, we have a very special returning guest with us today, Dr. Patrick Fagan, a sociologist, Ph.D., and also I believe he's working on a Ph.D. in clinical psychology. If that's not enough, what we're going to talk about today is a very special thing that he's developed for the social sciences. We've all heard of WikiPedia, but this is MARRIpedia. And we'll have Dr. Fagan explain what it is and what the purpose of it is. Well, welcome, Dr. Fagan.
Hello, Brendan. It's good to be with you.
Dr. Fagan, I was out in Salt Lake City at the World Family of Congresses, and you introduced something called MARRIpedia. What is it, and what's the intent and purpose of it?
It's like WikiPedia, so it's easy to navigate. People will already being used to Wikipedia will know their way around this. And what it does is it brings all the social science on marriage, family, and religion into the reach of the layman. And it's written so that it's easy for the layperson to read it, it's easy graspable, but at the same time, it's very faithful to the social science. So it's a layman's version of an encyclopedia on the social science on marriage, family, and religion, which is really the social science of the two great loves. You know, our Lord talked about, love God and love your neighbor. Well, your closest neighbor are your spouse and your kids, your family. Mm-hmm. And the social science on that is just tremendous. It backs up everything the church teaches.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, do you have many, you've been in this field for some time, do you have many corroborating or writers or professors or researchers that are interested, have expressed interest in contributing articles to MARRIpedia?
Definitely. And this will expand over the next couple of years. We're on our way, and we will become part of, everything looks like it's definitely going to happen on our way to Catholic University, so to have a university setting. And already in talking with academics down in Mexico and across the Latin American and Spain, there's a big interest in having a Spanish version of the same thing, where they'll have their own literature and translate ours and add it to it. And then, of course, we'll get theirs, translate the Spanish into English, and get that added to ours, so that you're getting a much more universal view of what the social science say about marriage and family. And, of course, all parts of the world, everybody knows a good marriage is great for both the husband and wife and great for the children. And the more you move away from that, the worse it is for the husband and wife, and the worse it is for the kids. It's a lot of common sense. I remember, about 2 decades ago, Bill Bennett, the former Secretary of Education, under Ronald Reagan, Bill Bennett had a great line. He said, the social sciences prove the obvious by means that are obscure. And then I added, and expensive. So it's teaching us stuff that, it's inherent to natural law. But these days, we need the backup of the social science. It helps because a lot of people are casting natural law aside, or casting things aside, and suffering and bringing lots of suffering to others as a result.
Well, let me ask you, my brother happens to have a Ph.D. in sociology from the University of Tennessee and had a master's at Columbia University. And many people in the sociology field are very liberal. Would they all be contributing to a site like yours, which would probably cast aspersions on the nuclear family?
Well, if they're good social scientists, to me, liberal and conservative mean people have difference about what policy should be involved. I think what you may be talking about, what's happened at the university setting, and this is a serious cancer disease, is political correctness. And political correctness has absolutely no place in any academic discipline, none whatever. It's a violation of academia, it's a violation of the intellect, it's a violation of the disciplines. Because you've got to search for truth, and you let the data fall where it will. Now, people will argue about, did you have good method? Are you interpreting stuff right? You didn't control for that. That's all very legitimate. And people of a liberal disposition will think of things that people of a conservative disposition don't. So the difference between the two sides on things can enrich the social science. But what's happening, and it's very serious, is that professors, rather than teaching what the social science say, are suppressing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a very serious accusation I'm making. There's a suppression of the social sciences on marriage and family going on in a huge proportion of the departments of sociology, the departments of social science all across the country.
Well, could you give us an example or two of what you mean by the suppression of the real results of the sociological studies?
Yeah, like here's one that you just don't hear. On every single outcome measured in the federal survey system, which is the biggest survey system in the whole world, best run, best data, best details. On every single outcome, kids who are raised in intact married families do best on every positive outcome. You name it, they're best. And the more you drift away from that, the worse things are.
Well,
on negative outcomes like crime, drug addiction, depression, anything that's negative that you don't want, they have the least proportions of those. So on every single outcome, the same holds for adults, but on everything. And here's the really big political incorrect one. On matters sexual, intact married couples have the best sex, period. Of course, that's common sense. That's what, when you think back, that's why the honeymoon was. People, traditionally, the sexual intercourse, the conjugal relations didn't begin till marriage. Well, now in the area, the sexual revolution, a lot of people think, it's fuddy-duddy in marriage. The data shows the very opposite.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you then, what about, we have nowadays, and we've had a Supreme Court decision regarding homosexual marriage. What about intact families and children with homosexual marriages, if that's what they are?
Well, let's take it, actually. There was a big discussion on this. There's a lot of research done. There are two very different types of research, and this can happen in all areas. There's what's called opportunity samples. Sometimes they're called, within the social science, they're called snowball samples. The snowball, the way you roll a snowball down a hill and it can get bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. So what a snowball sample is, or an opportunity sample, let's say I'm interested in how hunters feel about anything or how they act, things related to guns and hunting and bullets and licensing and nature and all that sort of stuff. If I go out and and I want to find out, okay, what's happening across the country on this? If my research is what's happening across the country, I don't go only to hunters. If I go only to hunters and then get their friends and, build up my sample size by going to the colleagues of more hunters, friends of other hunters, I get a very biased view. If I go to a national survey and ask the same questions, I'm going to get a much wider range. And I'd get a much truer picture of what America is thinking. If I go only to hunters, I get a very good idea of what only hunters are thinking and doing. Very big difference. Now, what's happened in the homosexual research area is all of the research touted in all of the court decisions were snowball sample surveys. There have been a number of national probability surveys drawing on federal surveys, and the results from there are very different. The very opposite, actually. And they did not get play in the courts. And what's more, they didn't get play by the American Sociological Society. the American Sociological Association, the American Psychological Association, and the National Council for Family Relations. The big players in this area. They used in their arguments before the courts, so the National Council of Family Relations was not part of that argument body to the best of my knowledge. APA and ASA were. And they used and touted snowball probability samples and denigrated the national probability samples. That's an example of what I talked about, the crimes against the intellect that are going on in the social. This is a corruption of social science. They're going to implode if they keep doing this. Because who will trust them? You're not out there to find out the truth. You're out there to push an agenda. Mm-hmm. And that's happening in all these areas that are in contention. Even almost like the layperson could think of it. You know, political correctness, is this acceptable? For instance, one of the big politically incorrect areas today is to be religious. You know, as far as the media and all the rest is concerned, you know, the scorn, sometimes it amounts to scorn that is treated on people of religious views. Here's the data. The more frequently people worship, the better they do, again, on every single outcome measured in the federal data system. You name it. Income, happiness, longevity, you know, grade point average. You know who does the best in school?
Who's that?
Kids who worship weekly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the grade point average, for the national average, grade point average, is highest for kids who worship weekly. Kids who worship a couple of times a month drops down a bit. A couple of times a year drops down still more. And the lowest are those who don't worship at all, as a group nationally across. Does anybody hear about this in college? Is this transmitted out into the newspapers and that? This is what I mean by political correctness that's going on. Hence the need for MARRIpedia. You can go to MARRIpedia and you will see top-flight research, peer-reviewed research for research that's done originally and drawing on only the Federal Survey system. You know, surveys done by the federal government because they're big, they're huge in number, they're expensive, but the data that comes from them then is the best.
Mm-hmm. Would the other side try to corrupt that huge data survey, or would it be very difficult for them to do so?
Well, it's not open. You know, it's a bit like, can you corrupt a journal? You know, if you're the editor and the printing and all the rest. So we control this because it is the sort of thing that would be, might be open to hacker attack today. So we preserve against that. I hope it would never get to that stage. And the people, you wouldn't have that happening from academics, but you would have that happening from people who are ideologues outside. So let's move away from that. That's nasty, and I don't like talking about that.
And what is your vision for MARRIpedia? You say that I guess you have to, first of all, you have to review all the articles that come in that you put on the MARRIpedia website. What about, and if it becomes very popular, I guess you're going to need a big staff to do that. And what do you hope occurs with MARRIpedia long term?
Well, what I hope will happen is actually it's a grand synthesis, broken down of the social science, and we'll build it out more topics. What we do, the ideal way for it to go forward is we take. Let me give you an example. About 3-4 years ago, this is the second or third time I did it. So we did a big review on the effects of divorce on children. It was about 30 pages, 35 pages long. And it pulled in all the best research, extracting all the key findings from about 600 different articles, reduced that to 30 pages. So it's tightly knit with all the best results. Now, that's dense, and nobody is going to read that. They're not going to pick that up for exciting reading at night before they go to bed. Drop and sleep. But it's very powerful and very useful. So what we've done with that is we've broken that down into smaller bites, illustrated it frequently with charts that illustrate the points made within. And that synthesis paper might be broken down into 20 or 30 subsections, which are different bits on MARRIpedia. And if it's dealing with education, it'll cross-link to, for instance, how kids in married families do, you know, the way they hyperlink across from education. How education affects income, that'll be hyperlinked, and you can move your way around MARRIpedia by just following the dumps. So it'll be a very powerful thing. And over the years, in collaboration with social scientists, and I welcome, actually, I really do, and I mean this, I welcome liberal professors who are open to the data, because one of the things in life, and it holds in research very much, you can get too stuck in your own opinion, and even though here we're not dealing with opinions, we're dealing with research, you can get biases. So you need people of a different viewpoint who will correct you and say, hey, you forgot this data. Or what about this data here? That seems to indicate the opposite of what you're saying. And if it's well researched, we want it in there. Because that's what keeps, also if it's the case, for instance, if you say, you know, here's a finding. When men get married, their productivity, their income, and all the rest goes up. When you control for everything, as of a couple of years ago, the research showed that it went up by 27%. Big increase in productivity. Now, there are some researchers today who disagree with that. And some of the research is good, some of it's poor. So they're raising objections, and it's well worthwhile tracking that to see, okay, let's just follow the data and see where it goes. From a good, robust conversation, we might find that maybe it's a bit less. We might find that maybe it's even a bit more. That's the way progress is made at the university level on research.
But you're saying that there's been a lot of corruption at the university level. So are you trying?
No, don't get me wrong. There's not. There's political correctness at the university level, and that is a corruption of the intellect. I'm not saying when we talk corruption here, people might think we're talking about finances or something like that. No, this is an unfaithfulness to the social sciences. If you're dealing on the social sciences, marriage and family is a key area. And one thing that's very clear is that on marriage and in family life and in everything that stands out of it, people raised and living in an intact, always intact married family have tremendous boons and benefits that come from the relationships they build, which really means come from the love that they put into it. The same also, by the way, is true on religious practice. And if you're interested in growing the nation, and the social sciences ought to be challenged, we all want to expect them, that they contribute to make things better. And the way you make it better is by pointing people towards the best ways to live. If you do this, your chances of happiness are much higher. If you go this route, you're getting into high risk here, and the probabilities of your failing on things get higher. That's what we ought to expect of the social sciences. Political correctness stops that.
I see. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you have a newsletter also. Can you speak to that? What is the newsletter all about, and how might people find out about it, subscribe to it?
Oh, it's the newsletter is just keeping people up. We do it once a week. We make it very short because, you know, we're in an information overload, so we deliberately make it so people can scan it very quickly, get the main gist of new findings. For instance, the Faith and Family Findings is the name of our newsletter. It's a one-pager. It has hyperlinks then into things that people want to dig further. And we point people towards breaking research in the area of family or religion. And then we link to the best articles. And we link also to what's in MARRIpedia. So it's a quick way for people to keep up on the social science or to be peppered with it, to stay current. also get educated so that they can pass it on to their friend. The way you can get it, you just send ask to subscribe to Faith and Family Findings. The email to use is MARRI, M-A-R-R-I, not Y, M-A-R-R-I, Marriage and Religion Research Institute, marri.research@gmail.com.
I see, and this would be you'd get it via email.
Via email, and
the results.
Open it up with a quick read.
And do you feel that this will be a way to really spread the word about Wikipedia?
Or
MARRIpedia, pardon me.
Yeah, oh, by the way, MARRIpedia is spelled the same way with their MARRIpedia, MARRIpedia. Like MARRI is the acronym we use for the institute we run, Marriage and Religion Research Institute.
So it's MARRIpedia.org, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Let me ask you, do you feel that this, starting this MARRIpedia will retard some of the findings of the corrupt aspects of sociological, politically correct studies? In other words...
Well, no, I got to correct you here. No. In fact, if the social science is good, if the sampling and the method is good, there are not bad findings. Okay?
Okay.
You could have a liberal, and there are many liberals who do very good research. The corruption is not in the research. The way that can be corrupted, well, we can get into that. The corruption is in what's not being taught in the classroom in colleges. It's the blocking of good research. If you only present one side, or if you deliberately keep a whole part of the social sciences off the agenda because you don't like what they point out, that is what I mean by the corruption. The corruption is in the teaching. It's not in the research. So it can be in the research. I know I gave the example of the snowball. That is, but where the corruption there is, not so much in that the snowball sampling was done, but in the suppression of the data from the national samples, where the data is much, much better. Lots of times research starts off with opportunity samples. You start exploring, it's not the best, but it's cheap, it's easy, and it's quick. Good social science is expensive. So often you get your feet wet with snowball samples, but you never say that this is the last word. It's not even the first good word, even though it's the beginning. But when you suppress big data, well controlled, well done. I'll give you an example. There was Father Paul Sullins, professor at Catholic University, went into some research done that was done actually on the gay parenting, looked at the methods, and then found, the way the definition was done of parenting and of the family, it skewed the whole research. It skewed it by the norms of everybody who does that survey. So there was let's say it was a mistake, it wasn't deliberate. He found that and then corrected for it, and when he did, the results came out the very opposite. They flipped them from saying that the gay parenting, it was beneficial, to actually showing that no, it wasn't. It weakened things. Now, normally when something like that happens, the journal that carried the original research will carry the new research as part of a correction, as part of bringing up the debate and keeping the debate going. If they don't do that, the minimum they carry is a letter to the editors pointing out what has happened, what the new researcher has found. Well, Professor Paul, could not get even a letter accepted by the journal.
Wow.
That's suppression of data. That is corruption at a very high level.
At the journal level, yeah.
At the journal level.
And they should know better.
They do know better.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. We have another example of this happening right now. There's a much bigger one. Let me get into it.
Well, could you do it very briefly because we have to wrap up right now?
Okay, very quickly. The same thing is happening at the census right now. The Department of Census is beginning to suppress data on marriage and family in the biggest survey they do every year. And the reason I think they're doing it, this is personal, because what the data will show on marriage and on gay marriage, on which for the first time now we'll have very good sample data. And they are now suppressing it. They're closing that down. So call your congressman and say this is a corruption of survey method and a corruption at the highest levels of government. We rely on census for very good data. They're closing it down rather than opening it up. It's like an eye surgeon blinding you rather than giving you good glasses.
Wow. Well, Dr. Fagan, I wish we could talk further. There's so many areas we could talk about. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. So thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And folks, check out MARRIpedia.com. Is it .com?
.org.
.org. MARRIpedia.org. And the burgeoning over the years of good social scientific research, which can be a place where people can go to find out, hopefully, good items and what really is truthful as far as the social sciences are concerned. Thank you, Dr. Fagan, and we hope you enjoyed our show and found it to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. Thanks for watching. I'm Brendan O'Connell, your friend for life.